Burlokk.
The Grumsworth.
And hello to all you, dear listeners, to this, the Preambull, your every so often digest of all things hobby.
That's right. And on this week's episode, we'll be bringing you an enthralling discussion concerning the building of miniatures, our regular breakdown of a magic card contributed by one of our regular listeners, and many conversational side quests. So make sure your backpack's full. And how are you, Grumsworth?
I've been pretty good, but not a massive amount has been done hobby-wise. But what has been done, I'm really happy with, and is of a reasonable quality, I think.
Oh,
I think so. I was trying to get through another three of the members of my Necromunda gang, my Caldor, the Knight's Doghead there. So they've been coming along kind of slowly. I'm finding this with these guys. Every time I get within what I think is about the last 2 hours maybe of paintwork, that suddenly spirals into more like 5 hours, right?
Always the way.
Yeah, but with these guys, it really, really is the way. I think it's because the basic colours go on quite swiftly. Some basic shading and highlighting, that all comes together quite rapidly.
Yep.
Then I move into the detail, and then it's all over. This is where the time starts to drag in a lovely way, but it really does slow down getting the whole lot done.
Yeah.
But what I have got done is pretty good. So we'll throw up a couple of pictures there of what I've been working on.
Okay.
So we've got one of the Caldor Juves and one of the gangers there. Both of these guys are using the heads that I received from Forge World, which I was overjoyed at when they arrived. I thought, cool, I've got nice new options for heads. I don't have to double up on the ones supplied in the plastic kit. All as well. I trimmed down, shaved up some of these heads, got them into the sort of shape that I like them to be, whacked them on these little guys. And it was at that point that I thought, something's slightly off about these.
Okay.
They are actually of a slightly different scale. They're made to be compatible with these guys.
Right.
But in comparison to the plastic heads supplied in the regular kit, they are slightly smaller. Which actually, they are, which actually meant that my options were actually cut down from the initial 16 that you get, because probably only about 8, I feel anyway, personally, really look decent for me. There's some crazy kind of out there. There's some guys with kind of grills over their faces.
Yeah.
You've seen those, a couple with sort of collars up around their mouths and their throats and stuff like this. Because I wanted my guys, as you can see by the pictures, their head to toe in browns and greys. The only really bright piece is the mask in the sort of bone off-white.
That's it, yeah.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted them to be very drab. Attention is drawn to the mask. So these heads had to be absolutely on point for me. And a large majority of them weren't.
What a shame.
It is a shame. They will get use in somewhere else.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
Which will be fine. But so the couple that you can see on the screen here, the Juve and the Ganger there, these are both heads that have undergone my rigorous selection process. Yeah. I've swapped them out for some of the others, and I've and ahed. I really wanted an Executioner's Hood style one, which we've got on classic Caldor. Yeah, echoing back to the metal miniatures, circa 95, I reckon.
My gang has always been Caldor, to be honest, same as yourself, but I'm going to stick with my 90s. 90s Caldor, thanks.
And they're lovely, for that. But these, I am finding these are an absolute joy to paint. They're really lovely.
Yeah, they look beautiful. Yeah, they look really nice.
Thank you. We've got the Executioner's Hood on there with the bionic eye. He's missing a few teeth, which is a really nice detail.
Yeah.
And he's the only one in the gang who is not wearing a whitened face mask. So he stands out a bit. He's a ganger there. I could use him as a champion, possibly, if I wanted to. But this was where some of the detailing issue actually came in. because so I got the head on there. I started to paint that in, and I looked at him and I thought, because he's not got that real focal point of the white mask, where are your eyes going to be drawn?
Yeah.
So I looked at him. I ummed and ahed. I considered, and what I actually went for is, as you can see on his pole arm, which is a blunderbuss and a sort of halberd mix. I actually decided to add a little bit more colour that I've used nowhere else in the gang. So he has like a broken, kind of worn red barrel to his blunderbuss.
That's one of the things I was going to say. I actually really like the look of it. At first glance, it almost looked like just a really heavy kind of rust, like an orangey rust, but it's like a red barrel you've painted on, isn't it?
Yeah, so that was just a choice to add a complementary colour that appears nowhere else in the gang.
Yeah, it works. I think it works.
I think so. I think it's done a good job. There's also various pieces of his pole arm. His pole arm is actually probably one of the most detailed weapons, paintwork-wise, in the entire gang so far. But I felt that he needed it because he comes across as so much darker without the white face mask there.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, all of the paintwork is superb, as it always is with yourself.
Thank you, Burlokk. Thank you.
But what I really like, actually, there's a grey blue going on in your corridor gang as the Knights of Doghead. It almost looks like a sort of a denim kind of colour, like a washed out denim. I really like that. I think that works really well. You have to give me the recipe.
The recipe is staggeringly easy, actually, although it requires very specific paints to achieve that effect. But I'll do a comprehensive breakdown of all of this once all 10 of them are done and they're ready for action. We can go through it then.
Yeah, you can give us a good blow-by-blow version of how you got them to their standard once they're all done. Yeah, that'd be nice. That'd be for a future episode, I think.
I reckon it will be.
Yeah.
I reckon it will be. And that episode will be called The Glorious Knights of Doghead.
Imagine.
In all their brown. So the other guy is a Juve. He needs to be more dirty, less ornamented. I did use, as well as the Forge World head, which is on him there, the white mask there just peeping through under the hood and kind of gag he's got over his beak there.
Yeah.
So he's got one of the Forge World weapon pack clubs in his hand, made out of an old wrench with a couple of big old nails, a bit of wrapping around it. And there is a darker, more brown red on there, again, just to give a little bit more colour, but not straying too far away from the overall palette. Yeah, it's a fourth colour on the 3 minimum, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That sort of thing.
Just a splash.
But yes, so working through those guys has basically consumed my sparse hobby time this week.
Yeah.
Although I am very, very happy with them. There should have been a third member to this completed over the week. But alas, I had terrible struggles with the heavy flamer duder.
Oh no, not the heavy flamer.
Yeah.
We were so proud of that miniature. It was looking good. I mean, well, the piece that I saw, the unpainted heavy flamer, should I say? It looked amazing.
Precisely, and this is the unpainted is the key point there.
Right.
Okay. So he started alongside these other two. I'm not going to get massively into this because this will be one of those conversations that eclipses everything, and it will become more of a rant.
Oh, no.
But suffice to say, I really wanted a heavy flamer.
Who wouldn't?
Who wouldn't? Absolutely terrifying. You know, in the close confines of a very dense underhive, lighting everyone up with, you know, liquid promethium, one would imagine, maybe something like that, or just a good mix of chemicals that light up.
Yeah,
that really appealed to me. I didn't use it. I painted it almost to completion, stuck to the heavy weapons duder. And weirdly, it just didn't. It's too detailed a weapon to fit alongside the rest of the gang. They're all armed with such makeshift junk. The heavy flamer is still makeshift, but it is massive. Even though the guy who is carrying it is a fairly rangy-looking brute, it did not work for me. There was just something about it that wasn't sitting right. I find that kind of rare that I suffer that problem when sort of painting. I normally have a fairly good idea of how it's going to look, and I get that down, and I'm happy with it. But this, completely the opposite. It really knocked the hobby wind from my sails.
What a shame.
It did.
Oh, what a shame. Does
But
that mean you're going to have to use another Forge World body or something to make up for that and attach the heavy flamer to it, or are you going to scrap the idea entirely?
for now, the heavy flamer is hung up on the weapons rack,
Right.
just quietly resting until I can come back to it, have a fresh look at it, figure out how to make it look good for me, and then find a suitable dude to carry it. He now carries the heavy. He now carries the massive crossbow type job that you get in the plastic box, which actually now I'm really happy with. That's fine
good.
now.
Good.
It doesn't sort of detract from him. It doesn't look ridiculous in amongst the rest of the gang.
Yeah.
But it is basically pure white at the moment, undercoated, a blank slate, and it's going to be painted separate to the guy that it's going to be carried by. So that's kind of next week's challenge, really.
Very good. Well, let's hope it comes together in a timely fashion. It looks like actually all together, your whole gang is coming together swiftly. It could be argued.
So it could be argued that by someone who didn't have all the facts. Yeah. For me, it's actually starting to get to the point where it's becoming a little bit painstaking. I'm still really enjoying it.
Yeah.
But I now need to. I think I'm going to set myself a hobby goal, which is sometimes what we all need to do.
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Like a hardcore hobby goal. I'm going to attempt to get old crossbow guy completely done, fully painted up and fine, and then I'm going to attempt to get Saint Biff, the leader, start to finish, and the remaining 2 gangers. So, if my name isn't Grumsworth, which it's not really, but you know, right? My name is. I've lied to you all these years, Burlokk. I'm so sorry. Right?
Revelations.
Yeah. Here we go. If my name's not Grumsworth, I'm going to have all of these ready to be presented on the next issue of this hallowed ground here, the Preambull. So watch this space.
You heard it here, folks. We can hold him to that now. Sorry,
you can try your very best. Yeah. So that was this hobby week. That is the plan for the coming one. I'm ready for action. And what about yourself there, Burlokk? How are you? And what have you been crafting for us this week?
Well, I'm okay. I'm very well, thank you. And my salve this week, my hobby salve. Yeah, it's been nice. I've been seeing projects through to completion and starting brand new ones.
I love it.
Yeah, so my terrain piece, my bit of scenery that I was working on, we showed a little bit of it last week, and I believe the week before as well.
Yes.
It's now finally got to a point where I'm happy to say it can be put on the battlefield and fought over by all of mine and my pals' miniatures. It's now finished, and I'm quite happy with how it's come out.
Can we have a look?
Yes, why not? Actually, let's get it up on the screen.
Throw those up.
Throw them up there. There we are. So, yeah, when I was building it, the idea was it was these big old chunks of orbital debris or bits of spaceship or entire craft, who knows, maybe escape pods of some description, fallen down, crashed into the ground and landing on this already ruined and smashed up city. And you can see there the bits of sort of scattered about as they've landed on the ground, bits of crater all around them as well. I've done a Google search for atmospheric re-entry scorch marks.
Wow.
Quite a specific.
Very good.
Thing. But I was like, well, actually, I know what scorch marks look like. I know what kind of patterns fire leaves on stuff when you burn it.
Don't we all?
But is there a specific kind of way that things burn up when they go through an atmosphere and crash land into the ground? Let's have a look. Let's see what's going on here. So I did that. Yeah, I think it was a picture of the Soyuz capsule or the Soyuz.
Oh yes.
Satellite. I might be pronouncing it wrong, but and these scorch marks were actually quite specific. They were quite thin and drawn out and long, elongated over the side of the chassis of this thing.
Okay.
I just wanted to try and emulate that on these bits of spaceship that have crashed into the ground. And you can probably see here a little bit how I'll try to emulate it anyway. I think it's worked all right. I think it looks okay.
Oh, it looks beautiful. Yeah, it does. The difference between the spacecraft components, whatever they might be, and the ruin that they've fallen into is really nice and stark.
Yeah, I wanted it to be not so different that it was, it was too stand out. I wanted it to all be part of the same piece of scenery, but I did want to try and get a slightly off, like different colours thrown in there.
Yeah, and I think that's really worked. The sort of like the bombed out black and greys of the building itself, and the soil and ruin around it, and that sort of space going grey white metal, complete with all of its scorch marks. I think that's a really nice contrast.
Yeah,
but as you say, not like overbearing.
Yeah,
it's not like a big hulking great pink chunk of space.
It did cross my mind that it should have perhaps been a nice shade of magenta, but no, it wasn't.
It crosses all our minds. Yeah. But it's come out beautifully. I really like the graffiti work as well.
Yeah. I've had a selection of snappy stencils. They're actually made by a company called TT Combat, and they do two or three versions of these graffiti style stencils. They're only a couple of quid each. Picked them up a long time ago, and I just had them knocking around for so long. I thought I'm gonna actually get some use out of this now. So I thought that some of the old splatter punks like those from RoboCop, with their spraying and who knows what sort of miscreant punks are hanging around the ruins of this old city, spraying up their graffiti on these walls. So that's what I looked at there, and I got the airbrush out and put some couple of different coats over it, with the pink. I've done a very heavy airbrush into the stencil, and and whilst it was still wet, I threw a lot of air into it, so it sort of sprayed it out and splayed it out a little bit. And then when I went back over it again with a slightly lighter pink, I made it so it was a bit more clean, a bit crisp, so that was like over the top of it, so it looked like it had been graffitied a couple of times.
Very good.
Gone back to it again, and their territory was re-tagged perhaps.
The effect has really come across there, hasn't it? Because it looks like a tiny little 35mm guy has wandered up with his tiny little spray can, had a little go.
Yeah, that's the idea anyway. Yeah,
really good.
So it's just I think I mentioned it in another one of our episodes when we were talking about ideas for putting scenery together. I do like putting some of those small little details thrown in, just to break up the color of the scenery a little bit, just to add a bit of character. Given much more time, I might have been able to have done it, to a better standard, but it's at a point where I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? It's got to a point where if I ever felt like going back and putting some more detail into some of these scenery pieces, that I may well do. But at this stage, I'm thinking, you know what? I'm happy to call this done at this point. It looks nice. It looks good enough. And the thing with scenery building for me is that I like to make it look quite practical, but also quite realistic. So the idea being that there's going to be enough room to actually put a couple of squads of miniatures on the terrain piece. I mean, having played many games of different styles before, I've played over some fantastic tables, but actually they're done to such a level of detail that actually standing your models on certain areas is quite difficult, because they won't be able to stand flat because there's so much amazing detail going on, so many 3D elements to the terrain pieces, that it's difficult to stand your models, which are on little flat bases, on the scenery pieces. So I've tried to keep that something that I've kept in mind anyway for this particular piece.
There's plenty of space there that you can get people in on those slight kind of those corner upper levels. You've got plenty of areas that you can move through on the ground and the base around, and there's none of those really annoying kind of gradients which look beautiful when you're looking at something. But there's no way I can stand a guy on that.
So I'm just going to make my terrain pieces functional and still look half decent as well. So it is something that I consider.
And I think being a terrain builder, when you are doing that, that's a really useful thing to consider. It's fine to make things that are just really artful and beautiful and super realistic and all that sort of good stuff. But if you can't play it, if you can't have, like you say, if you have to have all your guys walking backwards up a hill because their stupid metal weapons that have been supplied with will have them toppling down, it kind of breaks the immersion, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. Yeah, I think it does. Yeah,
As it
exactly.
is, what you've presented here looks like it's got the right amount of interest that it could be used as a focal point for a small board.
Yeah, that's right.
If you were skirmishing over it, but it's also really accessible and really functional as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would rate your terrain building example here probably about 8 out of 10, Burlokk.
Very good. I'm very pleased with that. Yeah, an
8
80%
out of 10?
drop is better than a 70% drop.
Precisely. That's what I've always said. I've always said that.
So that's been the main focus. But I was blessed with another hobby adventure.
Were you?
A new project from a good friend of mine who popped over the other day and was faced with the dilemma of being new to the hobby, really loving the game, the idea of playing a game. And the idea was that for him, his hobby will be building an army list that's competitive, uses all the rules in a really good way, really kind of beardying up his army list to make it as effective as possible on the battlefield. But the idea of painting an army or painting some miniatures to get to that stage before he begins playing is, I don't want to do this, he says. I just can't be bothered. I don't know how. I don't really have the time to paint, and I don't want to pay anyone to do it. He said,
brilliant.
He said, Burlokk, please help. And when he came to me and he said, what can you do for me? I said, come on over and we'll sit down and we'll do some painting. He's got an Eldar army. Yeah. He's got probably about 750 points. He's got a series of aspect warriors. He's got some striking scorpions, some dire avengers, a bunch of guardians.
That's quite nice.
Yeah, howling banshees and a fire prison. So not too much going on, but enough different types of miniatures and different color schemes he can use to make his army look varied. And so we sat down and we started work on some dire avengers, and it was just going to be very simple. Just get the blue, get it sprayed up blue, get it shaded, a little bit of dry brush highlight, a wash down, to bring it all together, and then just paint some basic details on. Because to him, for him and in his hobby, these are more like chess pieces that have a function, as opposed to a beautiful art piece that he can make his own and do all those of fun details and really get to grips with the painting and the artistic side. That's not really what his hobby's about. So he just wants to get these done, get them finished, and get them looking up to a standard. The 3-color minimum that people tend to have for their That's where we want to.
Why not?
So I said to him, we can break this down. We can do it over about 4 sessions. We can put some really simple techniques over the top of these. So that's something that we began this week as well. As someone who is essentially a blank canvas to the hobby and to painting, it's really nice just to say, you know what, let's just do the most simple, the most basic of techniques and be happy with them. It was a nice change of pace.
Yeah, that's really good. It's nice when someone comes around and asks for your advice and your help like that. Yeah, it's good to be in a position for you to actually be able to give some useful assistance there as well, isn't it? Because the painting thing can be super daunting.
Very daunting, yeah.
The same thing actually can be said the other way around as well. I've known plenty of people in the past that are really content to put their miniatures together, paint them up really nicely, and then pick up a rules book and think, I'd really like to engage with this, but this is making 0 sense to me. Can you tell me what a D6 is? And it's like, yeah, we can start right at the beginning, and this will be lovely and fine. I think it harkens back to something we chatted about in one of our earlier episodes, helping people into the hobby and giving your assistance there where you can. I think it's really important, because not only we'd obviously do it for any of our friends or anyone who's paying us, we'd definitely do it for either of those. That's fine. But beyond that, you're building more players for you to feasibly have games with, for more people to play. And it's just, I think that's something that's lovely about this hobby.
Yeah, precisely. And it was really refreshing, really nice just to see somebody who is full of enthusiasm and really wants to get involved and join in. He's been a part of our gaming group for a long time, and he's got other hobbies, but now he's taken the leap. And he said,
lovely.
I want to be folded into this mixture. Thanks very much. Come on, it's warm. The water's fine. Get in.
What a mixture it is. A mixture it is. Heady, wholesome.
That can lead us into our topic for the day.
I think it can lead us straight into it.
Yeah, because before anything miniature-wise needs to be painted, it needs to be assembled.
It does, and that itself comes with its own pitfalls and
Does.
and some really good highlight moments. I've known
Mm.
people who, for building, putting these things together from their tiny little parts, that is the hobby for them.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
so much fussed about the painting or the playing of the games themselves. That it is in the creation, the skill involved with putting these tiny plastic soldiers together.
But I mean, really, I think a good title for this topic is sort of sprue psychology.
I like this a lot. I like,
Yeah.
sprue shame, I think.
Sprue shame, because I mean, as many of our seasoned gamers will understand, and as some of our new gamers who are hopefully listening to us now will know and can empathize with a little bit, is that there can get to a point in your hobby career when you have a selection of, or a stack, or a pile, perhaps a mountain
Oh, a mountain.
of boxes of that one army that you decided to buy on a whim that's still in its blister pack, still in its box, still on its sprue. Getting it out of that box and getting it clipped off its sprue, getting them glued together is a process. And some people love it, some people hate it, but it needs to happen. If you want to use those models, you've got to build them. And there can be something quite psychologically demanding about that. I think it can be a bit of a, oh, I really enjoyed the idea of buying that. The feeling of euphoria, or I got spending that money and I got a brand new army. Great.
It's a good feeling.
Yeah, you see those beautifully painted miniatures on the box art. The idea of having an army is an idea in your mind. It's all finished, it's completed on the battlefield. But actually, when you get it, the reality suddenly is there, isn't it?
It is.
These are just grey bits of plastic on frames, and I need to now put the effort in to get them to the table.
Yeah, it's staring you in the face right from those little grey sprues. These mountains and mountains of plastic. Even if you talk about just buying a single box, often you'll be presented with a number of sprues with many, many tiny parts on them. You'll probably get a sheaf of poorly worded and photographed instructions, which can sometimes be quite cryptic as well.
Yeah.
And you'll be expected, or you'll be expecting yourself, to basically have something that looks like the box art. That's super rare if you can do that. But even if you don't consider the painting, which is not what we're talking about today, is it, Burlokk?
No, this is just the construction.
Yeah, that's right. The construction is what you have to do to get rid of that mountain of shame sprue. Having it sat there before you, or in a big old box, or sat in your wardrobe, that's why I think you say sprue psychology there. It is like a little bit of a psychological battle. Once you begin, however, once you get into it,
you find that rhythm, you find the flow.
Find your rhythm. Yeah. The flow comes in, and suddenly you have a load of grey plastic all assembled and ready for the next step of painting. But I think what we want to talk about here, the comparisons between older and newer models, because if you are like us, you probably have got stuff still in boxes, half-built things on sprues that you probably picked up quite some time ago. You might have a couple of warjacks kicking around in a heavy casting of metal. Beautiful. Or something beautiful, but super painful to build, especially compared to kits of modern days, which for the most part, I think anything that you can buy that's been released over the last maybe 5 years or so actually comes together with a lot more grace and speed and a lot less faffing about in general.
Yeah, there's been a lot of very clever design with how the studio and the designers have put together these kits. They're put together and they can be put together in very, very easy ways. I mean, there's a difference in types of kits that you can put together, in a sense. Sort of multi-part dynamic build kits, and you've got the push fit style multi-part kits, haven't you?
Yeah.
And we've seen that crop up at multiple times during the history of model kits being made. outside of the realms of something like Airfix or model airplanes or model boats, model ships that do come on plastic sprues like normal. But with miniature wargaming and specifically Games Workshop, they've gone from push fit to multi-part, back to push fit in some instances, back to multi-part again. And some of the more, starter sets, some of the starter sets designed for new players are designed to be put together as quickly and as easily as possible. So they've gone back at times to the push fit style of build, haven't they?
That's right. They have done. It's really interesting, actually, the evolution of the push fit itself. Again, over the last, I would say, 3, maybe 5 years, has come a long way. The starters that were put out to encourage new players to the game, you'd often find back in the day, your whatever edition it was of Warhammer or Warhammer 40k, it would come with a couple of armies in there. And for the most part, these miniatures were made of 2 or 3 parts.
Yeah.
And it would be a guy stood there in a fairly static pose. You would plug in his weapon option. So he might have several different weapon options. He might have a different standard lodged on his back, or a different helmet, maybe, this sort of thing. But these guys could be clipped off the sprues. And as the name suggests, push fit, you rarely had to use any glue. That weapon didn't need any glue for that. The weapon would just push into plugs in the body or any other areas of the miniature there. And you would be able to dry fit these guys together. And it was a good way of very quickly having your miniatures ready to play this game.
Ready to play, that's it, very quickly assembled. And examples of that would be, you look at Space Crusade, for example. We spoke about Space Crusade before.
Definitely, yeah.
That was push fit. You remember the Space Marine Sergeant, where you could either have the Power Fist and, did he have a sword? Was it a Power Sword?
Power Fist and Power Sword, yeah. Or he could have the Bolt Pistol and Power Axe.
The Power Axe, that's it, yeah.
Or the third and much maligned option, the Heavy Bolter.
Well, yeah, that's not the best of options, I don't think, for your Space Marine Sergeant.
It wasn't in Space Crusade, and it probably never has been in 40k either. But it was that they were the 3 options, and that allowed you a slight amount of customization. So in recent years, I think the ones that are a real highlight for me are the Warhammer Underworlds warbands, which are excellent miniatures, like really nicely sculpted, full of character, lovely scenic bases, very varied. They are all push fit. So because the game is a very sort of balanced, small scale skirmish, competitive sort of system, those models are there for you to clip off the sprues, and with barely any time at all, you can have them ready to play unpainted, just straight on the table, not a drop of glue required.
Yeah.
And they look just as high quality as any of the multi-part. But what they don't have is they don't have those options of changing. You can't pose him in any different way. The guy who has an axe held up over his head, that is the only option you get. You plug his axe into his hand or his shoulder joint or something. The push fit is there. It actually comes together fairly seamlessly in my own experience with putting these guys together. The all-over way that plastic miniatures have been crafted in the last few years is really superb. So these push fit guys, they look really good. They go together very, very quickly. No glue, so no mess there. And they're great for a beginner that can just pop them off the sprues, slam them together, and you're playing.
Or a tournament player like my friend who came over the other day, who wants to learn the game, who wants to learn the rules of the game, wants to bypass as much of the construction and the painting as possible.
Yeah.
Pushes him into the base. He's ready to go to a tournament with his new Warhammer Underworlds gang. All right. Yeah. For some tournaments, they need to be painted. But if he wants to play competitively with his friends at the kitchen table, which the majority of people probably
easily done,
right? But I think the lion's share of model kits that have come out over the years are obviously much more advanced than your standard push fit, which, as we said, are improving and becoming very nice. Does limit your options a lot more. But the idea of having these sprues in front of you, if they're all push fit, it takes a lot of that psychology and a lot of that, oh my god, this is such a huge mountain to climb kind of away, if you know they're all just push fit figures. Yeah, often they won't be though. Often they'll be full on, 8, 9, 10 pieces, perhaps more, maybe less than, for every single miniature, for every single rank and file model in your army. And that's a big job. And there's been times where I've got to the point where I've put in together 100 miniatures, and you get loads of little accessories, little bits you can strap onto the guy's belt, or bits you can strap onto their extra armor plates or whatever.
Bags, knives.
I'm going to ignore all that. I'm just going to do the basic,
yeah.
because it's just that much extra time investment in doing that, and that's also okay. But having all these bits requires a certain element of organization, I think, to your approach to tackling this, which we all have to do. For me, that a big part of that helps, that I think, is just organizing your space, having your tools ready, get everything set up in the same way that I would do for painting. I kind of have a different setup for the construction and the building of my models. And I need to sort of get into a separate headspace, a new headspace, and give myself a different environment that I can then work in. Get my cutting mat down, make sure my clippers are sharp, get a new blade in the craft knife. No sprue, no mold line removers, by the way. There's none of them here.
Oh no. I mean, we can actually, that flows in quite nicely, because so the push fit, obviously, the only thing you'll be needing is something sharp to get them off the sprue. And it is the case that modern plastic kits, despite the advances that have been made in the technology of, the sprues now are absolutely packed. There's no kind of dead space on them anymore, is there?
No.
They are just wall-to-wall components, with most kits anyway.
The idea of these sculptors getting as much room out of these sprues and getting as many bits onto the sprue as they can, and actually having those parts attached to the sprue in such a way that when you do clip them off, that bit of that part of the model that's going to be attacked with the clipper or with the craft knife will only be a bit that you'll glue into another bit anyway.
That's
so
right,
there's a lot of clever design that goes into it. And I think a nod must be given to these craftsmen that put these kits together with regard to how they're going to be cast in the plastic molds, because it's quite clever.
Hold up a second then. I'm going to give them a big old nod.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's viewing this, here it comes.
There we are. Exactly right. There's the nod.
There we go. Because it has become something that has been considered, I think. You will often find kits these days, their mold lines are concealed in areas that you will never paint, that you will never see on a miniature.
Very clever.
It is very clever, and I'm really glad to see it. Coming from those sort of times, I remember the original multi-part, I don't know, it must have been like a 2nd edition Space Marine sprue for the tactical squad. I think it was one of the first true multi-part kits that I ever got my hands on.
Oh, that was the one that the kit that they released after the starter set for 2nd edition 40k came out.
That's right.
With the separate shoulder pads, the separate arms, and the bolt gun that you had to clip the handle off of the bolt gun.
Yeah, that was a bit of a pain. But these things are sent to test us, to test our hobby muscles, aren't they? So
I have to say that I did pick up on the idea that you had to clip the handle off, but I have known many, many people who, at the time were friends of mine, and they didn't clip the handle off. They just stuck the bolt gun to the outside of the Space Marine's hand. And I'm thinking,
how does that even make sense?
I said, man, you've got to clip that off. That's not how it's supposed to look.
Yeah, that's if you want the bolt gun just lying on the ground or mag locked to his backpack or some junk like that.
And that sort of thing wasn't explained back then, though. There was nothing in the box.
It wasn't.
No. You need to clip that little bit off.
No. And that's where we come to the instructions on these things. So with the increasing detail, posability and wealth of components, sometimes looking at these things, you can think, I can see what this is. This looks like a weapon. I have no idea how it's going to get into the wielder's hands. And even less of an idea how it's not just going to interact with his shoulder pads, his harness, all of his grenades all over his chest, his big square chin, or his big old ridiculous helmet or whatever. So instructions they've improved as well, though, haven't they?
They have. I mean, they've got a bit more IKEA, a lot more easy to understand.
Yeah, and that's a lot. I would say a lot more easier to put together, even for the multi-part kits, because I think that's something that has been considered by the people designing these. Now we've got to that point where I think the experience for the model maker is taken into account with these.
That's right, yeah, and I mean that's with the modern kits, of course. But people are still building the older kits, as we've said already, and being able to have a lot of the right kit, the right tools around you is so important, because just trying to tackle some of these jobs is impossible. And I think having an understanding of the type of model you're building, if it's an old metal figure, for example, if you've got an old metal box set, I mean, certain models were very top heavy, or they had certain parts that just would really struggle to stick just with your average proper amount of super glue. So you'd need to make sure
proper amount.
Well, exactly, and a proper amount is just a very small amount. You've got to bear in mind. You don't need a lot of super glue to stick a metal arm to a metal figure, or a metal body, should I say? So pinning was vital in a lot of these situations, and that was often talked about in the pages of White Dwarf. Pinning was such a term that was just bandied about, so simple, never really described what I'll just find a pin vise and drill and stick a bit of brass wire in there, or a bit of, where do you get all this from? So pinning and your metal figures together was a big thing, and that leads into sort of the idea of sub-assembly, doesn't it? Painting your kits together, pinning them to a base, or sticking them to a bit of sprue and painting them separately. But
it does.
Assembling the whole thing. So there's so many things to think about when you're putting together these model kits, but thinking about how you want the end result to be, having the tools there for that right job, making sure that you've got them to the point where you can then begin to think about or begin to apply the color that you want to apply to them.
Yeah. So let's just have a quick rundown actually there. So the difference between the toolkit you needed back in the day, or right now with Warhammer Underworlds and figures of the push fit variety, the difference between that and the more general use kit. Because really, for those push fit, you need something to take them off the sprue there, whether it's your knife, your side clippers there, your bear claws, however you want to get them off, as long as they come off intact and in good order, jobs are good in there. And then you would have something to remove flash lines. If they were plastic, you might be looking at a specially made mold line remover, which we call a craft knife, don't we?
Yes, that's a craft knife. I thought that's what you were getting at.
Yeah, around these parts, we call it craft knife, right?
So quid from Hobbycraft. Go pick one.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you'd use that to take off those lines. You might invest in a small set of files, which can be useful, especially on your softer metal miniatures, and very certainly your plastic as well. And then you'd have your plastic cement or your super glue. So can you think of anything that we would add to that kit now if we were, as you say, preparing your area for a big old day of construction? So you've got your knife there to take off mold lines. You've got some files there to sand down those mold lines and sort of areas that are harder to reach.
Sometimes you had to use the file quite heavily on areas where you had in the old days, you had it quite a lot, mold slips. So sometimes you'd find that where a model should be like this, it's actually like that, and you need to kind of disguise it a little bit. So you take it back to the shop and get a new one, which you could often do, but sometimes you couldn't be bothered, so you just had to sort of file it a bit and smooth it out. So a file, set files, get your craft knife, as we've said. When you're dealing with multi-medium kits where you've got plastic and metal,
or maybe resin.
Or maybe resin as well, of course, you've got to bear in mind that, you can't use plastic glue when you're sticking plastic to metal. It only works plastic to plastic. So having that slightly more brittle finish between a plastic piece and a metal piece is something to bear in mind. So I would often always pin a metal piece to a piece anyway.
Do you want to just give a tiny little breakdown of what that is for people who, because I reckon if you've only put together kits in the last 2 or 3 years and they've only been plastic, maybe if the majority of your hobby experience is with a line of miniatures from GW, there's very little chance that you would ever have had to pin anything together.
Yeah, that's true.
So do you want to give a quick Burlokk infomercial on the process and theory of pinning?
Pinning with Burlokk. Here we go.
Pinning with Burlokk. Brilliant. Yeah.
So pinning with Burlokk. The idea being that both sides of two separate pieces that you're sticking together, one will be too heavy or way too far on the other piece and will break away. You need to be able to fuse these together in a way that it will be invisible and look like they're just glued. So you need to basically insert a rod, sometimes two, depending on the size of the piece you're dealing with. You'd need to be able to align both of these pieces together and have a single rod, a piece of paper clip I usually use that just goes
strong
through.
choice, yeah.
So you'd get a tiny little drill with a little tiny drill bit, and you tighten it up nicely, and you drill it either with an electric Dremel, perhaps, if you're lucky enough to have one of those. If not, you'd use a little hand drill, little pin vise, they call them, and you drill a hole in one side, you drill a hole in the other. You'd insert said small piece of paper clip into one side, and you glue both together. Obviously, there's a one bit that's quite tricky, and that's lining up the two holes to be exactly where you need them. So I always, before I begin to drill, put a wet blob of paint on one side, put the two pieces together, and then open them out, and you've got an exact point at which you need to drill each side. So yeah, I'd hold it neat, pin them together with a little bit of paper clip, and then that strengthens the bond basically, because you've got like a brace essentially that runs between the two pieces. And I would find myself spending a long time pinning, a long time worrying about, is this drill bit going to break? Because they were so small and so fine that very often, if you just put the wrong bit of pressure at the wrong angle, you could snap the drill bit and have that drill bit wedged in there, and then you're into all manner of trouble. But yes, I mean, it's not particularly advanced to your experienced model maker, but as Grumsworth, as you said, to people who may not have ever needed to pin something, it's something they've never done before. So it is quite an involved process when it comes to pinning models together. Was that succinct enough? I mean,
I think that was pinning with Burlokk 101.
Maybe we could have this as a regular thing.
Yeah, I mean, drop us an email or something, or have a little chat with us if you'd like to see the return of this feature.
Let us know.
Let us know. I think it could be. I think it could be the meat and bones of the next 10 episodes.
Oh, let's bring it on. Let's do it. Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Pinning with Burlokk.
Exactly. Yeah. Each and every week we can attempt to find you an increasingly difficult model to pin. And it probably would actually end with a Warhammer Fantasy Val dragon of some description.
That's the culmination. That'd be the crescendo.
And the breaking of the drill bit. So there was one occasion where I was putting together a little group of metal Yetis, I believe they were, and I actually ended up using one of those pin vise drill bits that did break into the metal arm that I was pinning. That drill bit actually became the pin.
I've done the same thing.
So it was,
yeah.
Tried to make the best of a bad situation. It was a really expensive pin, but that arm's probably as solid today as it is the day I pinned it all those years ago.
That'll never come away. Yeah.
What I really liked your hint there of using a blob of paint on one side of the piece that you're trying to put together to align and mark out where you're going to put your hole for this pin. I actually think that's a good technique for marrying up and meeting parts of miniatures, even if you're not pinning them. If you've got recently I put together a plastic Reaver Titan for Adeptus Titanicus.
Oh yeah, lovely models then.
Oh, it's incredible.
Beautiful models.
Yeah. One day it'll have some paint on it as well. Imagine that. But there were a couple of moments there, because there's a lot of armor plates and things which, although they do have very specific grooves for you to fit them into, it is also the case that they can be sort of rocked and moved. There's some sort of ball joint action going on with them a little bit.
Yeah.
and having a mark of paint on there, pressing it in and dry fitting it, and then pulling it away and thinking, yeah, that looks fine, I'll have it in that place. That could have helped with that a little bit, actually. So that's quite a good technique. A little pearl of wisdom, I'll let you up, Burlokk.
Thanks.
I'll add that pearl to my old necklace.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Maybe, you know, I was going to mention a fellow, not podcaster, but streamer comrade of ours who has quite a deep obsession with the gathering of pearls.
Oh, not black pearls.
Yeah, you know it. Yeah. But we're not going to mention his name here, are we?
Everybody knows his name.
Everybody knows his name. No, they don't. Just one little mention there of the sub-assembly.
Oh, yes.
Because it's something we touched on briefly, and I think it goes well with the pinning and this sort of thing. So sometimes it'll be the case that you'll get your miniature off the sprue, you'll break it down into its component parts, you'll look at the grainy instructions, you'll puzzle it out, you know what you're doing. And you look at it and you think ahead to that terrifying step where you're going to add some colour onto this grey plastic doodah. And you notice that his weapons or his shield or whatever it is he's holding or riding or whatever obscures a good chunk of the model.
Yeah.
Maybe from the side view or the head-on view it does, but when you're looking down above, you will see that you can still see all that detail on the chest.
Yeah.
This sort of thing. So this is the point where you might do a sub-assembly where you might leave the model in 2 or 3 pieces, paint those each individually, and then glue them into place afterwards. You look at the miniature and you decide while you're building it if that's necessary.
To be honest, I rarely do it. And I know that lots of people like to. I mean, I've known people that have begun somewhat recently, and they insist on sub-assembly. And my initial reaction is usually, you don't need to do that. You know, very often it's only when you're doing quite advanced paintwork or your kit, you know, really deserves that kind of sub-assembly. If you want to paint the head of your Space Marine captain and the gorget of his armor comes up quite high, you're going to want to paint that whole head. But it gives some problems really when you're painting, because if you're painting the face and you put all this detail, maybe you've painted loads of lovely stubble on his chin or something, I don't know.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Suddenly though, you stick it in place once you've spent all that time painting it and you can't see it. Or you can see it because it's painted so bright when it should be so shadowed that actually it looks a little bit out of place and it looks a little bit unfinished. And in its components, it looks wonderful.
Fine.
In its sub-assembly phase looks perfect. But then once it's together, the shadows aren't quite in the right place. So going back to the planning side of things, when you're putting your models together, especially with a sub-assembly, you really need to be thinking ahead about how this is going to look once it's painted. Because I think there's more pitfalls, more to worry about as a sub-assembly than there is by just not bothering and just sticking it together.
I agree. And for the most part, I do exactly that. Although recently, with the models that I've been talking about over the past few weeks, the Caldor Necromunda gang, they are a very small, but still they're a sub-assembly because they do have a very raised gorget round their throats and shoulders. And once you've got the head down into that, you will struggle to paint the detailing, of which there is an overzealous amount.
Sometimes it's just the angle you're going to need to hold the brush.
That's it.
A bit more awkward, rather than needing to worry about the colors you're going to use or how you're going to paint it. It's more just physically, logistically, this is a bit more tricky like this, so I'm going to do it separately, which I completely understand. Yeah, and that's
which has saved me a lot of hassle because also it's the case that it's all well and good. I can get the brush in at an angle that I can apply paint to the face, but it becomes even more of a trial to not apply it to the gorget. So with those guys, I'm actually painting the recessed shadow inside the gorget in a very dark colour. I'm then putting in the basic colours on the heads and then putting them into place. So then I can add some highlights, and the lion's share of the detail comes afterwards. So it's not painting those heads individually, start to finish, and putting them in. It's kind of a little bit of a workaround to stop me messing up and spreading flesh-coloured paint where there needs to be brown rags.
Where there need to be no flesh colour, exactly.
Where there need be no flesh colour. Yeah, so I think that's quite a nice little rundown, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Some of our thoughts on building miniatures, at least.
Yeah, I think we covered most aspects there. The sort of stuff you're going to need if you happen to be a new gamer and you found our podcast, welcome. And if you're listening to us talking about all this, maybe you've picked up a few odds and sods, a few little bits perhaps that you might be able to use. If you're an experienced old veteran like we are, then maybe you've just heard us ramble on and you're nodding very feverishly at us saying, yes, I understand entirely, or maybe you're shaking your head saying, no, I disagree with you entirely.
Exactly.
Either way, perhaps let us know.
Yeah, let us know. And if you want to talk to us about the merits of a mould line scraper,
of which there are none, Grumsworth.
Of which, well, as far as I can tell, and as far as you very vocally can tell, there are none. Get yourself a craft knife. Maybe at some point in some sort of description or something, we'll show off and talk about our miniature building kits.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see if they're similar.
Yeah, I'm looking at mine now, thinking if I spill all of that out onto the floor and you did the same thing, would we see the same stuff?
Hang on a second.
Maybe.
Mine's just a load of mould line scrapers. Oh, that's all I use. Okay, then, moving on to our next feature, our regular bit, the most regular bit of this entire podcast, I reckon.
It's pretty regular, yep.
It's pretty regular. Each and every week, we are breaking down a magic card, the choice of which has been chosen by one of our dear listeners, isn't it?
It has, yes. This week's card comes from Mikey.
Oh, Mikey, you have chosen a stellar choice for us to investigate here. Let's just get this up on the screen for anyone viewing this. Apologies to anyone just listening. You're going to have to bear with us. Hopefully our description will be lively enough to paint a picture into your minds, and then you can Google it.
For sure.
Something like that, yeah. So here we have a card called the Master Biomancer, which is from the Gatecrash set. He is a mythic rare. He's a sparkly, spangly, hard-to-find fellow, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
He is a multicoloured card featuring both blue and green. He has the little Simic symbol, consequently, the blending of blue and green down his card there as well.
That's right, yeah.
So this guy is an elf. He's an elf wizard. He's a creature. So he's a character that can be summoned.
Well, this guy, he looks really cool, actually. I really like the look of this card. The Simic, these guys are actually a guild on a planet-wide city called Ravnica. And the Simic are a collection of very intelligent and some would say not lunatic, they're not like mad scientists or anything like that, but they are obsessed with the art of life and evolution and bringing nature on to its ultimate conclusion and advancing species that they choose to advance, who they would then befriend and fight alongside or work with or use to improve the lives of the citizens of Ravnica. A lot of it goes on behind closed doors in dark alleyways and in secret laboratories and things like that. Yeah, that's clearly where this guy is.
He is, isn't he? Yeah. So the artwork speaks very strongly to that, doesn't it? Who has crafted this piece for us?
The artist, William Murray.
William Murray. Yeah, so what we've got here is this guy, as you say, he's dwelling somewhere pretty shady looking. And the lighting on this captures that, doesn't it? We've got a good amount of darkness around the lower sort of quadrant of the card, fading up to light being lit from above. So it's suggesting that this character it looks like he's underground somewhere to me.
Yeah. Or he could be in some secluded back room of a larger place. It looks quite vaulted, that ceiling, so maybe it's some sort of skylight, perhaps. That's
Quite vaulted,
just out
yeah,
the back. Yeah.
There's something of a tent about it to me.
The background, there's these big old, look like pods or containers of green fluid. Well, it looks of things with creatures inside them. They look like some sort of experimented on creatures, creatures that this master biomancer himself has worked on and brought to this state of evolution. Some of them look quite fanged and spiked. Others look a bit more amphibian and frog-like.
Yeah. They're contained within these almost jar-like sort of specimen jars, aren't they? But they look sort of slightly organic. Some sort of sack that they're being grown in.
Yeah, kind of think I'm thinking a little bit like the Matrix here. You know, when
yes.
Neo's in that pod.
He's got this sort of menagerie of beasts that he's no doubt experimenting on, growing, grafting. As his name suggests, he is a sort of a manipulator of biology.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, some sort of magic perhaps involved, or purely science, who knows. But this thing, he's got something in his hand, like an eel, like lamprey type, turtle-jawed creature, some sort of mutated or hyper-evolved creature that he's looking at.
Yeah, it's staring him right in the face, with a fairly unfriendly sort of drop to its jaw, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't see those creeping around in the wild. And he actually looks. We'll get to the Elven character, this Master Biomancer, in just a moment. Suffice to say, he doesn't look that impressed with his latest experiment, does he?
No, quite disdainful.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
he's looking down at this thing. He's holding this thing out and he's looking down at it in a way, isn't he? This thing in his hand. He's got its tail coiled around his arm, as if it's holding on in some way. And this little creature that this guy has created doesn't really want to be let go. But this elf, he's looking down at this creation of his with some manner of disdain in his eyes, a bit of a grimace in his mouth, and his amber glowing eyes look quite piercing and a little bit emotionless.
Yeah, and they're all sort of traits that you associate with elves, actually, don't you? They do kind of look down on other races. They're quite imperious and disdainful. And the creature that he's crafted here is very much the subject of that elvishness, I think.
Like he's about to toss it back in the soup, or like he's about to gift it to somebody else and just to get it out of his sight.
He may do, or he might just bang it straight back in one of those pods, do a little bit more work on it, maybe.
Bring it to its eventual form. But the guy himself, this elf wizard himself, he looks quite, used the word earlier, imperious. He does. He looks quite posh, quite resplendent in his
He looks posh. Yeah, he looks posh. He's got some fancy elven armor on, exactly the sort that you would expect. It's almost, for me, it has a traditional elf look about it.
It does,
very leaf sort of shapes, very well made, silvered there. He's got a handsome, detailed looking, nicely made cloak on, isn't he?
Yeah, it looks like it's got a nice design to it, and it's all very very clean. He's got some big fat silver rings on his fingers, so he's obviously well to do. He's obviously somebody of higher class.
Well to do, he is, yeah. Which is, it kind of makes for an interesting image, because he definitely has that character about him, and all around him, he's kind of handcrafted subjects are all a bit ill-begotten, aren't they? They're all a bit badly formed. I think we can definitely say at this point, they have an ill-favoured look about them, don't they? Because they just do, right?
They do have an ill-favoured look about them.
They do. But yeah, the piece of art is a lovely piece.
Quite cold.
It is quite cold. But that's kind of what you would hope to see from this sort of character. I think this whole card, actually, it's another really good, like, pure example of, right down from the name to the flavour text at the bottom, we've got everything here that we need to discern what this character is about and where he might fit into the world.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and with the rules in mind for the actual game itself, let's talk a little bit about the function of this character in the game.
Yeah.
As we've alluded to, the Simic as a guild, they are the masters of mutation and evolution. They have the sciences all wrapped up in their minds, and they know what they're doing with it. And so, to that effect, if this elf wizard is on the battlefield under your control, if any other creatures enter the battlefield after him, they enter the battlefield a little bit stronger, a little bit, with a little bit of a buff to their abilities. They get +1/+1 counters on them. So they turn up on the battlefield.
Very
and
nice.
They get gifted these +1/+1 counters, which improves their strength and their defense, equal to the level of this master biomancer's power. So the stronger the biomancer is, the stronger the creatures that enter the battlefield will be.
Yeah. We can kind of summarize the suggestion of this mechanic is the fact that he's lending or using his own resources, his power and his skills to elevate those around him, to improve their combat effectiveness, make them a little bit more woundy, a little bit more damaging.
Yeah. Either through flavor-wise, either through gifting these creatures that enter the battlefield a little familiar or
I like
creature,
that. Yeah.
like he's holding out in his hand there, that improves the combat effectiveness of his allies.
I really like that, actually. Yeah.
Or maybe he is literally just gifting them the power of a certain mutation or evolutionary trait that they might not have already had. So it could be looked at in a number of flavorful ways, but I think the function and the flavor works quite nicely there in a neat little package. Do you want to go over the flavor text for this one just to cap it off?
Yeah. So this is kind of the nail in the coffin, which cements this character's kind of whole idea here. So the flavor text reads: "Nature is a wonderful engineer, but works far too slowly for my taste." Which is, again, you can imagine a character of sort of elvish descent, like speaking like this,
speaking down his nose while saying it as well. You know,
he very much so
works far too slowly.
Far too slowly for my taste, as he would do. Yeah. So he is. This character is. He's saying that although he approves of nature as he would as an elf, and he understands that the wild beasts and creatures of the land are evolved for their specific purpose and they are wonderful like that, he just thinks that nature does it too slowly. So he's gonna give it a helping hand with his glowing green sacks, his stern elven visage.
Yeah, there's just a wonderful arrogance to this whole card. I love it. Everything from the artwork to the name to the rules to the flavor text. Yeah, all there's this wonderful air of arrogance about it, just like it should be with the Simic and with the elves. So yeah, good job, William Murray. You've done a good job on this card, artwork wise, and the rules committee, whoever made this card, have done a nice job marrying it up as well.
Do you think they deserve a nod?
Well, yeah, probably.
Well, yeah,
they probably should get a nod, shouldn't they? Excellent.
You've done well there, boys. There, I was just going to ask, how does that elf say that again?
Oh, the flavor text.
Yeah, how does he say it again?
Oh, nature is a wonderful engineer, but works far too slowly for my tastes.
Absolutely perfect. Brilliant. Yeah, superb.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, if they ever need sound bites, if you're watching this, Wizards of the Coast, like if you need sound bites for your card, you know where to come.
I'm for hire.
Exactly. Yeah. For sort of upper class elven types.
Biomancers, if you need
biomancers, yeah. For upper class elven biomancers,
very specifically biomancers, they have to be I can't do your average Joe elf.
No, and not just a regular biomancer either.
Oh, no, it
has to be a master.
I
hope you've enjoyed that little piece there. Us bringing you another magic card that we've broken down there.
Thank you, Mikey.
Thank you, Mikey. It was a strong choice. Yeah, very strong choice. I like that a lot. We got a good vocal sound bite out of it. Go and check out this card. Have a look at it on Deckmaster or something like this. It's quite playable as well, isn't it? This one.
I think so. Yeah, I do think it has a home in many builds, different formats, specifically Commander. I think it's very good in because it synergizes perfectly well with loads and loads of other cards. It really adds to it. So playability wise, it definitely gets sort of 10 out of 10 for me, with all of its function, its flavor, its design, and its playability. Yeah, really nice card. Really enjoy it.
Yeah. So it might be one to pick up for those of you that are interested in playing a bit of your blue and your green, which is quite a strong combination, isn't it?
Certainly is. Grums, I'm afraid we're getting close to the end. We're going to need to move on.
You are joking. Has our time elapsed again?
Oh, Father Time comes knocking again, sadly.
When will he leave us in peace?
I don't think he ever will, brother. I don't think he ever
He's
will.
not going to, is he? He's just not going to. He's not going to. We are definitely, sadly, going to have to bid all of you lovely people goodbye for now.
Yes.
But we will return, won't we?
We absolutely will, yeah. Thank you for joining us. It's been a good time. I enjoy our conversations, Grumsworth. I always do, and I enjoy having our wonderful coterie of listeners along for the ride with us.
Oh, yes. That coterie. You've got to get that coterie in. Strong. Yes, so I reckon it's probably about this sort of stage in the proceedings where we sign out with a quote, don't we?
Yeah, a small quote.
I've picked one out for us this week. I actually think it fits quite nicely with what we've been discussing today, even though this was picked long before we decided on the detail of this one.
Serendipity, my friend, serendipity.
Providence. Okay, then. So I might read this in the style of the character who says it. Yeah. Do you think that would be appropriate?
Is the character who says it Grumsworth?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not on this occasion. I'll delve back into that book in a future episode. Yeah.
I fully endorse this idea of you putting on a voice. Let's go for it.
You endorse it. Okay, very good. All right, I'm gonna bid all of you goodbye now, and this quote will be the last thing you will hear from me this week. So it's been an absolute pleasure, all of you out there, and always a pleasure, Burlokk.
Yes, get in contact with us via all the relevant means. Send us an email, contact us on our YouTube stream. Check us out on social medias like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And on that note, Grumsworth, see us out.
It's the job that's never started as takes the longest to finish.
Brilliant.
There we go.
You've been listening to The Preamble. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms. And if you want to contact us, just send an email to thepreamble@gmail.com or find us at The Preamble on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Your hosts were Grumsworth and Burlokk, brought to you by roguesgaming.com. Special thanks to our contributors, our spotlight artist, and of course, to all of you. See you next time.